If you are a regular viewer on this channel, you know that when I do a book review, I usually say that I think the book is great and I also think that you should read it. Well, this book is no different. And if you are new here, welcome. My name is Drew, and on this channel, I discuss all topics regarding higher ed, including book reviews, current events, and also navigating the college experience as a student. And when I say that this book is no different, I want to go one step further and say that I think this book fits into my top 5 of higher education books that I have read thus far. And the book is called The Great Upheaval by Arthur Levine and Scott J. Van Pelt. And it is phenomenal in a sense that it talks about the history of higher education, where it is headed post-COVID, and how it is tied into and influenced by other industries throughout the course of time. And it is very comprehensive, it's very thorough, and I think it is fascinating how everything kind of connects and how a lot of what we've done as a society has permeated into education and is a result of what we see today. So the book kind of walks you through a lot of the historical context, and it is saying currently with what we're facing that schools are going to have to either continue and adapt slightly with how they do things, or they are going to have to become radically disrupted. And so the authors walk you back to the beginning, and they talk about the first 2 industrial revolutions and what that meant for our society, and how essentially with the creation of factories, that everything was tied to the clock and tangible outcomes, that you produced X number of product, and you did it in a certain amount of time where you were clocking in and out. So then naturally, we wanted to educate a workforce to be able to do that. So we started to create schools along the same guidelines, that you were clocking in and out, and it was about the amount of time that you were spent sitting in a classroom and learning. So they talk about the development of higher education and how that evolved, and talks about the evolution of the credit hour or the Carnegie unit, and what that meant in terms of demonstrating competency. So if you spent so much time in a classroom studying a specific topic, then you were deemed to be knowledgeable, and that would be how you progressed to your degree. And that was tied to that time that the factories and the industrial revolutions produced. So what the authors are saying is that we are now evolving and progressing to a point where that may no longer work. And we have seen a lot of evidence and a lot of specific instances of this. And it's almost like we are either in denial, or we don't know how to change, or we just don't want to change. And so this book is great in a sense is that it exposes everything and offers a lot of opportunities to think differently about things. And so if you are a higher education professional, or whether that is staff, faculty, if you're senior leadership, whatever, read this book. It will give you such a better perspective of where your institution sits and where it can go. And so throughout this history and where we are today, the authors talk about 5 major disruptions that are going to influence higher education. So that was the internet, mobile technology, big data, artificial intelligence, and then the augmented reality and virtual reality. And so we've seen how the internet has influenced not only how we live our lives, but also education. And then when it talks about mobile technology, it talks about how our students are always in their phones, and they are viewing things 24/7 like YouTube. And this has radically changed how they interact with faculty and staff. And this is actually something that I've thought of with my own work and that I have seen. And I was talking to someone on my team not too long ago where she had reached out to a student because she wanted to set up a meeting. And that student had returned her call at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. And evidently the student thought that that was normal to call a working professional, because in their eyes, 24/7 is the way it is, and not necessarily aware of this, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 business hours that we've been so accustomed to following. And so it's almost like a clash of generations. And then where do we go from there? Do we tell the student that's not acceptable, or do we find a certain level of accommodations? I'm not saying that we would call them back at 11 o'clock, but maybe we become more flexible with interacting with our students. So that was very thought-provoking and an immediate connection that I made from the reading into my own work. And so when it talked about big data, it didn't necessarily focus so much on currently how we use analytics, but it was talking about opportunities in the future. So maybe they're proposing that we move to a point where when you're taking a class, you don't reach the end of the class and then receive your grade that tells you whether you passed or you're competent in that topic. But what if you received feedback throughout the class in real time that was constantly guiding you, almost like a GPS? And how would that influence what you're learning or how you're studying? So that you don't have to wait until the end of the semester to find out, oh, I don't think I did as well as I thought, or maybe I don't know what I thought I knew when I started this class. And so it was an opportunity to kind of shift how we view grading as a whole. And then when I talked about artificial intelligence, I think already with the advent of technology and how much it progresses, this is already outdated. And with ChatGPT and the I forgot the name, but the language processing, the GPTs, the AI platforms that are just exploding, including image generation. Now we're getting voice generation, all of these things. How does that play into how we teach? How does that play into how students learn? And then also with the augmented reality and the virtual reality, they imagined a world in which you could take a class in a virtual reality environment and the classmate sitting next to you could be halfway around the world. And then you could go explore a virtual campus together and make those connections. And I know in certain circles that they are looking at virtual reality for cadavers, specifically for populations like the American Indian populations, where culturally they are not really supposed to be around physical cadavers. And so they can actually learn about anatomy in a virtual world to where it is culturally acceptable to do so. So you've removed a barrier and now you've provided this access and this education that did not exist a few years ago. So I think that is really cool, and I think these are very real disruptions, and I'm excited to see where certain institutions can take them. But I also see where there's going to be some resistance, because that's what we do in higher ed. We just resist everything, and we're very slow to change. But the second part, or I think there are a few parts of the book, but after discussing these disruptions, the authors looked at three major industries, which was the music, film, and newspaper industries, talked about their evolutions, but also talked about innovations and disruptions that completely changed those industries in the way we view them today, and then drew those parallels into higher education. So for example, you have the music industry and how that evolved, but then how the disruption with technology was Napster, and how that changed and pushed things into the world of Apple Music and Spotify. Or with the film industry, how it came along with you could suddenly record movies off the TV onto a VHS tape. And now you have Netflix, and you have algorithms within Netflix that are able to predict and suggest titles based on your viewing history. And then with newspaper, there was the digital age, how it went to digital viewing of news, and then even went further with social media, where individuals were now journalists and reporting things and not the newspapers. And so it talked about specifically with newspapers, how people no longer wanted to purchase a newspaper and read it. They wanted to read specific stories. And so this is where they present this idea of unbundling. And the same thing happened with music, where on iTunes, you could buy albums, but you purchased individual songs. And so what they're saying is, as we progress through education, this is what our students want, is they want an unbundled education. They don't want to take that package of a full 4-year or 2-year degree. They want to take the specific classes that they need that will make them employable, and they don't want to waste any time. So what does that look like? Well, they talk about how Google and others have created specific IT certificates, which are only classes that you can kind of complete in 6 months, as good examples or good pioneers of where this is headed. But I wonder, what are we going to do with a bachelor's degree through that lens? If we take out prerequisites, Does that change how students learn? Does that change what they know? Does that change how they think when they get to the courses that are specific to the program? And what is the impact of that after graduation? Does that make them less of a critical thinker or a problem solver? And I know that would probably be the most pushback, especially when you have a lot of faculty that are teaching a lot of foundational courses. And what if we say they're no longer necessary? That's going to be a huge change. And I don't know how quickly that will arrive or what potential solutions there are to sidestep having to cut programs or classes or faculty. There are a few other things, along with the being unbundled. What the authors have explained is that students not only want that, but they also want what is considered the just-in-time education, which is essentially on demand. They want to take the courses that they either want or that they need for a degree, and they want to do it on their own time. It's no longer the days of I'm coming to campus, I'm spending my day here, I'm going to all my classes, and then I might go to a student organization meeting, and then I might hang out with friends in the student center and have some lunch, and then go home and study. Essentially, what the college student today is someone who goes from parking lot to classroom, back to parking lot, and most likely off to a job. There was some research that they had mentioned where students no longer see much value in student organizations, which I completely argue against for many other reasons, and perhaps that's another video, but that's what we're working with today. So not only does it become even more critical that the classroom experience becomes enhanced, but what happens once those students leave the classroom? Where does that learning occur? And how do they take what they've learned in the classroom and build on that? And so the authors are stating towards the end is that higher education, and these are my words, is I think we are going to face an identity crisis. We need to evolve, and we need to evolve fast because technology is only speeding up and we can't keep up. And I think one of the most profound things that these authors said in the book is higher education was really the only industry that once COVID sort of settled down and things started to resume to normal, higher education wanted to go back to the way it was rather than embracing the changes that happened during COVID and run with them. Because essentially what COVID did is served as a catalyst for a lot of these inevitable changes. And so I've talked about this in Nathan Grau's books about how COVID was a catalyst for demographic changes and enrollment drops, but also how students view education and how we do education was going to change, but now it's here because of COVID. So now what do we do? And this is something that I've thought about in my own work is how do I work with students differently? If a student thinks it's okay to call at 11 o'clock at night, and if they want to take classes on demand, that completely changes how I interact with that student because their motivations and their thought processes are different. And I've talked about this in other videos too about their academic preparedness, their level of social skills because of COVID. And then when you package on all of this or add on all of this technology and their comfort with the technology and what they can do with it, that really shakes up what we're doing. And I think we need to do something fast. And we just need to become, I don't want to say innovative because it seems a little cliche, but let's get creative. Let's find new ideas. And I don't know what those ideas are. So if you have them, please let me know in the comments. And if you're a student, let me know what would work that an institution could do, that maybe your advisor or your professor could use that works for you, but it doesn't kind of like make it lame. Because I'm not saying faculty need to use TikTok, but what is something that they could use that makes it easier to connect with you and guide you in a way that it doesn't become lame and it doesn't become overdone? Because I know, for example, with texting students, throughout my career, it was always calling students, and then that stopped working. And so institutions started to adopt texting and two-way texting at that. And it really worked. We did get a lot of feedback with students. They were responding to those texts. But now as other industries have adopted texting, we're kind of lost in the crowd and we're just getting deleted or not responded to altogether, especially when you have a lot of scammers that are using text. So what's the next thing? What are we going to do again to connect to our students and constantly stay ahead of that curve? These are the questions that I think about when I think about this book. It's what I think about when I'm on my way to work and when I'm at work, actually interacting with students and my colleagues of what can we do differently that incorporates where we are as a society today. And that is why I think you need to read this book. I think you need to get yourself a copy today. Again, I still stand by my statement that this is in my top 5, maybe my top 3. And this is absolutely phenomenal work. And I especially appreciate that this is a post-COVID read because it is current and COVID has shaken up so much that this is accurate with what I am actually seeing today. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure you hit the like button and also the subscribe button if you want to continue to see more book reviews. Perhaps I will find a new one to add to my top 5. And I also welcome your suggestions as well. So thank you. And with that, I will catch you in the next one.